Hey everybody, it's Curse, and today I'm going to bless you with a Lightning Blast Sorcerer build guide. I started off wanting to do a fairly standard static orb Lightning Blast build that was meant to be beginner friendly and just a good starter build, just because it's so cheap and easy to get going and can get you farming for your late game setup. But then I wasn't getting what I wanted out of the build in terms of DPS, so I started messing around with it and I landed on something pretty sweet. Massive cast speed, great ward thanks to Heart of Eukaros, and phenomenal single target damage because we're not focusing on static orb or lightning nova at all. The only focus for this build is Lightning Blast. Most builds can't just focus on Lightning Blast because it's mostly meant for single target, but with enough cast speed, even Lightning Blast can clear large groups of enemies. It's a really good way to start the season and easily transition into it because it's not that crazy expensive. Anyway, I hope you get a chance to try it out. Irashaimase. Alright, let's go over the skills and what makes this build unique. So starting with Lightning Blast, since this is our main source of DPS, it's spec for single target with convergence node right here. Always get lightning ages. It's one of the best buffs in the game, so make sure to get it. 3 points in Shatter Shock for basically double damage. 4 points in Arcane Power. Make sure to get the charges. And then finally, if you have the extra points like me, just dump them in front loaded. If you don't have 25 points, take whatever difference you have out of front loaded and you're good to go. The Lightning Blast tree is fairly straightforward. There's nothing new here, just a single target Lightning Blast spec. Flame Ward is also straightforward. Get the extra charge, cast when stunned, less hit damage. And then Teleport. Nothing too crazy here as well. Make sure to get some armor, stat buff duration, a little bit more resistances and stun avoidance. It doesn't hurt. And then the one thing I want to mention is make sure to get the 3 Elemental Nova casts here. So these are really important. This is how we're going to be casting Elemental Nova. We're going to try to avoid actively casting Elemental Nova. And here's the Elemental Nova skill tree. And it does have some interesting things to mention. This is standard. Just get extra damage and extra area here. Max crit chance from charge destruction. And then the cool thing to mention here is Ascended Current node. If you read it, you'll notice that you get increased shock effect even for your Lightning Blast. So all we need to do is just cast Teleport every 4 seconds to get plus 30 shock effect for our Lightning Blast. So this is a sneaky single target damage boost in Elemental Nova. Skill to note here is Arcane Ascendance. We're not running focus. Nobody likes to just stop and channel focus for like 3 seconds to get their mana back. Forget that. Instead, we run more damage and more defensive capabilities with Arcane Ascendance. So let me show you a cool little trick. You spec into just 1 point of acuity, making it so that Arcane Ascendance has a 2-second cooldown and it wears off after 4 spells. And then you decrease that cooldown with Cosmic Insight. It goes down to 1.1 seconds. And so we cast our 4 Lightning Blasts and get that 1.1 second every 2 seconds essentially. We can cycle Arcane Ascendance. And then we get 300 ward on start. And so what this means is we're getting about 150 ward per second just spamming Arcane Ascendance. And you can double click it as well out of combat to get extra ward. Check it out. 500 ward. And some of it is extra because of Heart of Eukaros. But yeah, you just double click it and you get some ward. Free ward every 2 seconds. Now in combat, you don't want to double click it. You just click it once, and as you're spamming Lightning Blast, it's going to wear off right away anyways. Because you don't want to miss out on the extra spell damage and cast speed. Anyway, so that's a neat trick. Then we get a little bit more damage and 1 point in Superconductor. You don't want any more points because by the time the second Lightning Blast would trigger, Arcane Ascendance has worn off anyways. So there's no point. And you can see I have 1 extra point that I don't even know what to do with. None of the other skills that are left here are any good. You definitely don't want to put any points in Cunning because it's going to increase our cooldown and therefore decrease our ward per second generation. But yeah, this is a cool little trick to get yourself some extra ward as well as a solid DPS boost. So that's it for the skills. It's pretty straightforward. And now let's go over the items. There are only 2 items without which this build doesn't really work. And so those are the two core items. The first one is the boots. Foot of the mountain. So these boots are quite special in that they reduce the mana cost of your skills. But in order to get that bonus, you have to stand still. So it's a huge cost to pay. However, there are a few things to note. And the most important one is that the skill teleport does not break that bonus. You can see Mountain's Endurance. I have 3 stacks. Still have 3 stacks after teleporting. And that is true only for the Sorcerer movement skill teleport, as well as Transplant for Lich and Necromancer. So all the other movement skills, they break that bonus because they work a little bit differently. Now let me show you what happens if you cast Lightning Blast too much without that bonus on. So you can see if I'm moving and casting, my mana gets drained fairly quickly. So you cannot sustain infinite Lightning Blast without that bonus. And so these boots make it so that we can take the 6 mana Lightning Blast, bring it down to 0 and cast it indefinitely, even when activating Arcane Ascendance, which increases mana cost by 5 and increases cast speed, so you cast them faster. Make sure to grab these boots. They're pretty easy to obtain. They don't have move speed on them though, so that's a major problem. However, their effective level for legendary potential is quite low, so you should be able to get a 1 or 2 LP pretty easily and then get movement speed in there. And the other bonus on them is quite interesting as well. 100% of your dodge rating is converted to endurance threshold, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, these boots are just great overall. 12 to all attributes, 28% endurance. Those are really strong bonuses. 28% endurance is a tier 7 bonus. 12 to all attributes, that's insane. And it's also kind of easy to target farm these boots because you can get them from the Lightless Arbor dungeon boss. And the second core item in the build is the Twisted Heart of Eukaros. This is how we get our defenses by converting health to ward. I love this item. It has cast speed, it has strength, which means armor for us, elemental spell levels, and 20% health. You just can't go wrong with it. It's also somewhat easy to target. You just have to fight the boss at the end of the Reign of Dragons timeline, so just farm him a bunch of times. I have a video of me farming him about 100 times, so check that out if you haven't already. But yeah, these are the two core items. And for the rest of the items, it kind of depends on what you want to do. I opted for stacking armor. You can see I have 2500 up to 3000 when I activate my teleport buff, which should be at all times. And that's 50% damage reduction for physical attacks. And to do that, I use the Isadora Tomb's Blessing belt. Incredible belt. It's got essentially a tier 7 armor flat, a tier 5 cast speed, and a tier 5% armor increase, essentially what it's doing. And that's really powerful for what we're trying to accomplish because those stats don't really spawn on belts normally. So to get them on a belt is high value for us. Then I'm using this unique ring as well for the shock effect. It amps up our DPS a bit, but this slot for the ring is quite adaptable. You can switch it up with other items. I opted for woven flesh as well for multiple reasons. One is obviously the 100% critical strike avoidance. Another one is for that overkill damage leech that's health, as well as all the other leech bonuses. They're really useful for this build because if we don't leech enough health, we can't get enough ward. I think it is a very good item for the build. I wouldn't say that it's core. You can definitely get your crit avoidance elsewhere and you can get more life leech on this build as well. But I think it's a good option. And it's also easy to target farm. Just kill the abomination at the end of Fall of Outcasts right here. And for the rest of the items, we just want tons of cast speed. We want to max our resistances, get ward retention as much as possible. So a little bit of intelligence here and there. Strength doesn't hurt because it gives us armor if you're going for the armor route. And a source of armor shred is a must-have for this build. You want to have a combination of armor shred, lightning rest shred, as well as shock. All three of those are what makes this build so strong single target. You stack a ton of those and bosses just melt. Also a source of apply frailty is really strong. So you can see I'm getting a lot of that through this amulet with 15% cast speed as well. Crit strike multi. Yeah, this is a great amulet to have for this build. You want to have your lightning blast at max crit chance as well. So get spell critical strike wherever possible. So this catalyst is solid for prefixes. The suffixes are not so great, but You can't have everything in life. This is the best base catalyst as well because we want 6% spell crit chance. Dragonhorn Wand is best in slot for the cast speed. And then for prefixes you want crit strike multi and cast speed. Ideally for suffixes you would want chill and shock. Stun chance doesn't hurt either. And then for your helmet, I have 4 levels in Lightning Blast, but you really don't need that many. You can opt for something else here. But yeah, you can see that I haven't fully optimized this build in particular. I haven't socketed these boots, just haven't had time to. But it still performs really well, especially single target. And then in terms of idols, you have to have the cast speed when Lightning Ages idols. They're just so powerful for this build. Make sure to get 4 of them with either lightning spell damage or lightning damage as the suffix. And then the rest, you can just get life or resistances to max out your res, whatever you need. And for blessings, crit strike multi is quite powerful here. However, I think the better option is spell lifesteal. I just didn't want to switch out my crit strike multi on this one because it's a good roll, 39%. And then 50% lightning res shred is best in slot for this one. For Reign of Dragons, you can either go all res or crit strike avoidance. Make sure to get armor from Spirits of Fire. And then for Age of Winter, you can either go for endurance threshold or maybe percent armor. You have a few options here. And a couple of quick notes about updates coming in 0.9, the multiplayer patch. EHG just made a forum post today and they are updating the visual effects for Lightning Blast in the next patch. So it'll be even cooler. If you want to check out that post, I'll include it in the description for the video. And one more note. From the skill trees, the only change that I noticed is that this node is actually getting reworked and it's no longer going to give shock effect. It's actually going to make the overcharged Nova deal more damage. So we won't get the extra single target DPS from this one, unfortunately. But other than that, the build should be fairly intact and untouched by the new patch. So it'll be just as strong. And now let's go over the skill rotation. So you want to stand still and get your 3 stacks of Mountain's Endurance so that your Lightning Blast is free. And then you can just blast away. It costs nothing. If you want to move around the map, I would advise to just teleport and avoid moving if you don't have to. But obviously if you have to move, you have to move. And then in tougher fights, you can activate Arcane Ascendance. Just pop it every 2 seconds. And you can see it gives you a ton of ward. It's quite nice. And even if you're out of combat, you can double click on Arcane Ascendance for a little bit of extra ward. If you're dealing with large groups of enemies, just pop teleport. That's going to cast 3 Novas and wipe almost every single weaker enemy. And if you're getting overwhelmed, don't be afraid to click Nova. It's going to stun everything because we have so much stun chance and stun duration. And it will give you a reprieve to either teleport away or lightning blast whatever's left. But yeah, the playstyle is very easy. The only thing I would note is that you have to take advantage of Lightning Blast homing in on enemies. So for example, you can take on enemies outside of your range. So you can see right here, I don't have the dummy in range, but I'm hitting it. I'm leeching life. So I'm hitting it from here. You can even go over here, let's see. See, I can hit the dummy from this distance. So take advantage of that. Keep in mind that you have more visibility to the top left and to the top right of the screen because of the isometric nature of the game. So always try to travel in that direction, top left or top right. And that way you can take advantage of this little trick of hitting enemies from further away. I'll also show you a fight with the Emperor of Corpses where I'm hitting him from off screen. And that's a great way to compensate for the squishiness of our character and for our long range damage. Let's quickly go over the passives. Nothing too crazy going on here. Make sure to get every single node that gives you cast speed. Crit strike multi as well. I like getting 6 points in this one for the resistances. It's a very standard passive tree setup. Nothing too noteworthy here. And now let's talk about skill progression if you're starting out in a new season, which I think a lot of people will be interested in because it's a 0.9 coming up. This is actually a great build to start a season with. You have single target in Lightning Blast and AoE in Lightning Nova. So just spec into those 2 skills early on and you'll have a pretty good time leveling up. Later on, you want to grab your teleport so that you can cast 3 Lightning Novas with it, and your Flame Ward, and finally Arcane Ascendance. I don't think you need to worry about Arcane Ascendance too early. It's a very easy transition from one skill to another early on in the game. And now let's talk about a slightly different way to run this build. Instead of going for pure armor like I have, you could choose to go for dodge. If you can get like 2000 to 2500 dodge, that's gonna all convert into endurance threshold because of these boots. So theoretically, you could run something like 2.5k HP, all of it covered by 60% damage reduction from endurance. You just have to get your dodge up from various sources. A really good one is going to be this blessing right here, Spirits of Fire. Instead of flat armor, you can switch to 70% dodge, I think is what it is. And then you just itemize for dodge in your other item slots and you're good to go. I think that would be a really solid iteration of this build. So if somebody tries it out, let me know how it works. And if you do go for the dodge converted to endurance threshold route, you definitely want to drop the Twisted Heart of Ikaros. Ward is not very valuable if you're going for endurance because endurance does not protect your ward. So drop the heart, replace it with Stormcarved Testament for even more DPS. And yeah, just don't get ward anywhere. Another option for a defensive layer is Vessel of Strife. So if you want to stack a lot of health regen and get your ward through that, this might be a reliable way to do that, combined with this ring as well. It's a great combination because armor protects your ward, whereas endurance doesn't. And for 0.9, it looks like this ring, the Invoker's Static Touch, is getting a change. And so if you want to run ward, you're going to want to use this ring for this build. Since we're spamming so many hits per second, you're going to get a lot of ward out of this ring. Possibly instead of the unique Osirian. And now check out a Corruption 400 Monolith run. And always remember, if you're running out of mana, just ask yourself,
why are you running? Why are you running?
Stop running and teleport around. Keep those 3 stacks of Mountain's Endurance and your mana will regen on its own. Anyway, that's it for the build guide. Let me talk a little bit about my plan for the next few weeks, because there's a lot going on in March. First off, I'm upgrading my PC setup. The one I've been using and made all these videos so far with was running on a GTX 1080 and is about 6.5 years old. It performs quite well for gaming, but recently with the addition of video editing, and I have dabbled into machine learning model training in the past as well, and all of that can benefit from a better GPU. And so with the GTX 4000s coming up recently, it has been very tempting. I was wondering whether I can last another 2 years until the 5000 series, but I can't do it. The video editing is getting a little bit annoying with the 1080. So I pulled the trigger and got myself a 4090. So I've got all the parts and I'm gonna be putting it together over the weekend here. So wish me luck. Hopefully nothing is dead on arrival and everything goes smoothly. And I might not even have enough time to put it all together over the weekend, so I think this might be my last video before 0.9 hits next Thursday. And then my focus is going to be to release as many builds as I can before the Diablo 4 open beta hits the week after. I think I'm probably going to be able to release 2 builds. Time is a major constraint for me. I've got a full-time job and 2 kids, so it can get a bit difficult managing all of that and video editing on the side. It's all thanks to the wife for enabling me to do all that. So yeah, that second week of March is going to be last Epoch 0.9. Third week is going to be Diablo 4 early beta. And then fourth week is going to be Diablo 4 open beta. And then in April, I'll probably go back to last Epoch. But yeah, part of my plan is to get a 4K monitor and create even better quality content. Anyway, thanks for all the support. Love y'all. Kochiso sama deshita.